For 2 decades, overseas distribution has turned Indian films into global blockbusters, from London to LA. But as audiences evolve, streaming rises, and Trump's new 100% tariff on foreign films looms over the US box office. What does this mean for the Indian movie business abroad? In this episode, my colleague, ET's in-house film journalist and critic, Rajesh Naidu, talks to veteran overseas distributor Pranab Kapadia. Together, they decode how film exports are changing, how the diaspora still drives demand, and what rising costs could mean for the next Rocky Rani ki Prem Kahani or RRR overseas. It's Friday, the 16th of October. I'm Anirban Chaudhary. This is the Morning Brief.
Hi Pranab, welcome to the Morning Brief podcast. You have spent at least 13 years at Eros in overseas distribution. So the first thing we would like to ask you is your key learnings in terms of how to distribute Indian films in the overseas market. Could you share your key learnings?
Yes, I've spent at least the past 18, 20 years in this business. And the biggest takeaway for me has been the growth of the Indian film industry in terms of its penetration, in terms of its likability, in terms of its uptake, in terms of the box office grosses. I'll tell you when it started for me in the early 2000s. 2003, to be precise, was the first time I got associated with the theatrical distribution of a film called Mujhse Shaadi Karogi. So at the time of Ugi, you can say the entire release of the film in overseas market would be in the region of 300 screens, and the gross that we are looking at best would be lifetime gross would be $2 million, which, mind you, for 2003 is a very big number. But that is when it all started, because from single screens the film started releasing in multiplexes in the UK and in US. So more and more business started getting recorded, and you have rent track data that started monitoring our films. So around that time in the early 2000s is when the real revolution started of Hindi films outside India.
Right. But over the years, according to you, what are the themes in particular which are resonating with the overseas audiences?
See, you have to understand the psyche of the audiences for me to give you that answer. Now, most of the people had a certain idea of the culture and the lifestyle of India. It was all about family values, it was colors, and it depicted the Indian culture of the time. And those are the films that really started performing because the audiences were seeking that sort of entertainment. While in India at that time, you had a lot of action films that were doing well, but those were not necessarily crossing over to the international markets. So it's really the top Yash Raj, Dharma Productions, those sort of films that connected with the overseas audience in the markets like UK, US, Australia.
Right.
Of course, the big market is also Gulf, and Gulf inherently always preferred more action films because the diaspora living there was at the time more on the working class side. So you could always see that an action film would tilt more towards the Gulf, whereas the family film would tilt more towards the US, UK, Canada markets.
Overall, according to you, how big is the overseas distribution market if you talk in terms of revenues?
Yeah, so the overseas box office of Indian films is about 3,000 crores. This is theatrical business.
Right. So there's a lot of Indian population outside India living, and because of subtitling, now Indian films are reaching to non-Indians also. Now, when you look at that, part of the population, how much this incremental audience have gotten added to the pie of viewers watching Indian films?
So when you talk about Indian films performing in overseas markets, you always consider the Indian subcontinent audiences, just not just the Indian. Primarily, the audiences are Indian, but it's really the Indian subcontinent. Yes, subtitling has helped crossover, but I would say it is the numbers of non-Indian subcontinent people going to cinemas to watch Indian films thanks to subtitling is a very, very small number. And I definitely am not a customer for these films to go to the cinemas. But I've been watching them at home thanks to OTT. The same thing I'm sure is happening with Indian content for the non-Indian subcontinent audiences at home, but I don't think that is really translating to a significant number on the box office.
So when we talk about overseas distribution market, what are the key markets we are referring to? And are there new markets which have added to this overseas markets universe because of a lot of popularity Indian films making inroads in festivals and people knowing about Indian cinema?
Yeah, sure. So there are basically four pockets. One is UK and Europe. The second is USA and Canada. Third is the Gulf. And fourth is Australia and New Zealand. These constitute about 80% of the business. So if you look at any typical Bollywood film, it would release definitely in these five pockets, which would be covering about 20-25 countries. Then you have about 30-35 other countries, which are so pockets in Africa, pockets in Eastern Europe, where the real big films cross over. So any of the Khan films or any of the Karan Johar films or a Yash Raj production film, these would cross over to these smaller markets. So essentially you, in terms of countries, you have about 50 to 60 countries where, really the big films go. And this I'm talking about theatrical. I would say the number is between 50 to 60 countries for one of these big films.
Right. Overall, when we talk about the worldwide collection, how much part of overseas market contribute to the worldwide collection?
So as a thumb rule, I would say it's about 15%. But then depending on the production house and the type of film, it can go up to 30-35% as well. So I'll give you an example of a film like Rocky or Rani Ki Prem Kahani. So even before release, the production house, they know that this product is going to really connect with overseas. So you can say that this film is going to contribute, say, about 30% of its worldwide revenue will come from overseas. We are talking about 20 million US dollar plus business for that film. But as a thumb rule, I would say 15% is what you would expect any film to contribute in terms of overseas contribution towards their global box office. US market, as a thumb rule, I would say is 35 to 40% of the entire overseas business. But sometimes it can go up to 50% as well. Whereas if it's family and drama and romance and songs, then you find that the US contributes to 35-40%, as opposed to Gulf will remain at 30-25-30%.
Yes. Could you shed some light about on the way you select a film for distribution? So do you go by the performance of production houses, or there are certain thematic things that you look in a film and then you select it for overseas distribution?
So there isn't a simple answer. So of course the face value is first of all. Then thematically the film, it can be very niche. Then the production house. So it's a no-brainer obviously to be participating with any Dharma production film for international release. But when it comes to other studios or other films, we always, as I said, consider the face value, consider the theme. And even once you have selected the film, you have to be very pragmatic about what is the estimate of the business that this film is going to do. Obviously, every Friday is a learning, and films very often break out. They do way more than what you thought it would, and the other way as well.
Right. So how much of the size of a film matters to you when it comes to selecting a film for distribution? Mid budget, big budget, or small budget? Because there are challenges in distributing films.
Actually, the budget really is more a trade sort of discussion, because you tell me, is Sayara budget? We don't know exactly what is the budget, but you can sense that the budget of Sayara is not the same as the budget of War 2. But look at the box office performance of Sayara. So it would be foolish, right? If a distributor were to take a decision that this is a small budget film, so let's not do a theatrical release. So, budget should never determine whether the film should merit a release or not. So, I think in terms of distribution, it is the way we operate is we align with the production house and we become collaborators with the production house, because in the sense that we bring our knowledge, we bring our experience to them, and ultimately we take a joint decision. If we feel that the product has the merit, it doesn't matter if it's a small budget, we will definitely align with the production house and give them a good release. Now, why will the exhibitor just take our word for it and play any film that a distributor gives them? So we have to be very judicious. We have to do our study. And for that reason, we always watch the films that we are going to distribute so that
Right.
we can give our constructive inputs to the production house, and we jointly decide, yes, this is meriting a release. Then we are going with so much conviction to the exhibitor that the exhibitor then believes and knows that yes, they are not going to just request for screens when it doesn't merit.
Have there been any instances where, a film that has worked in India has not worked overseas, or other way around? Have you come across such instances, or it's always what has worked in India also works overseas?
There was a film called Babul. Babul was like the
Mm.
unofficial sequel to Bagban, and Bagban
Mm.
had resonated immensely with audiences worldwide. And that's a
Right.
classic example of a film that really connected with overseas audiences, because it had everything that one would want from an international sensibility point of view, of course from India as well. Now, when Babul was made, the international audiences really lapped it up. It didn't unfortunately work in India, but it really worked in international. That the film really connected in such a big way in the UK. I would say even a film like Chak De India, if you look at the data of Chak De India, um,
Mm.
in fact, that's an example of something that has worked in India, but it has not connected so well in international markets. Obviously, the title is Chak De India, and then in the film, you have an Indian hockey team beating the Pakistani hockey team. They're not going to go buy a ticket and watch their team, see their team lose. So we found at that time that it's a beautiful film, but it has not shown the result at the box office like it performed in India.
Over the years, especially post pandemic in India, we are seeing almost in a resurgence and wide acceptance of regional films. How difficult or easy it is to distribute a non Hindi film in overseas markets, and non Hindi films, the way they are working in India, also working in the overseas markets?
There are two reasons for this. One is obviously Hindi audiences who are traditionally customers of Hindi films are watching South language films in a big way. The other reason is that these South language films also release a Hindi dubbed version. So for that audience who wants to see it in Hindi, now they are getting it in Hindi language as well. So it's become language agnostic. And just like in India, you can see that when there is a big South film releasing, it becomes, as we call it, pan India film. It has now become pan global because people here are also watching it like they used to go and watch, a Hindi film in the past.
So, kind of a similar story is playing out in the overseas market also.
Yes, 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 absolutely. Now, at that time, there was no exchange of information. It was very difficult. It took time for people to know, oh, this is a great film. It's running very well in India. Why am I not getting it in the UK, or why I should go and watch it? It took weeks or maybe months for that information to come through. Whereas now, thanks to social media, overnight, instantly, you know, oh, my friends in India are watching this. You don't want to be left out as a customer in the overseas market. So you go and find those films, and of course, that finding of the film has led to the exhibitors demanding the same products that are working in India to come here.
Right, right. Let's come back to the important aspect when President Trump came out with this diktat of levying tariff on foreign films made outside the US. Have you got some clarity about what exactly it meant for films made outside the US?
At this stage, if I have to guess, there is a certain component of tax on every ticket that is sold. So when a customer buys a ticket in the US for 12 or $14, whatever, a certain amount of that money goes towards tax in the US. He is planning to impose a higher percentage of that tax, which means the ticket will become more expensive for the customer. But this is very preliminary and very early for me to make a judgment on this until exactly what is the policy that they are going to come up with. And then, of course, we can evaluate.
How do you look at this emergence of streaming platforms? Do you consider them as an enabler or to a certain extent overseas distribution, kind of an obstacle kind of thing?
Look, so I take the streaming platforms as an avenue to learn, as an avenue that we can coexist. In fact, what advantage they've brought is they've opened up a consumption of multiple language films for the audiences. So that is I think that is straight away translating in how the non-Hindi films are performing so well on the box office, because streaming platform has given me an opportunity to watch it at home. Now I want to consume them in cinemas. So that's a positive side to the streaming platforms. I think instead of pushing back at them, we find a way to coexist and to learn from each other, because I'm very firm believer that cinema experience is going nowhere. It is here to stay, and people are going to keep going as long as we give them enough reason to go.
Right. My last question to you, I just want to understand in terms of challenges and what are the things that need to be done to make overseas distribution more robust and more successful.
I guess what we could do in terms of growing this business even more is definitely put a concerted effort into cultivating more countries who are on the periphery, who are small right now, who require some sort of investment in terms of consistently making sure films are releasing there, so that the audience in that territory starts accepting, knowing first of all that, okay, every Friday I'm going to get a film here, starts not consuming it at home, but actually starts enjoying the experience going out there. SRK film releasing in a big way. So starting from a small release of Ashoka there to all his films getting... Now, imagine if effort is put into slowly convert every such territory. As I said, we are going to 50 or 60 countries. We still have 140 countries. And you will surely find an Indian in every part of the world. Potentially that Indian is your customer.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you so much.
From 300 screens in 2003 to nearly 60 countries today, India's cinematic reach is undeniable. But new politics, new platforms, and new pricing could reshape that map. Whether Trump's tariffs dim the lights or simply shift the audience online, one thing's clear: the world still loves a good Indian story. That's it for today. You were listening to the episode on The Morning Brief. It was produced by Rajesh Naidu, sound designed by Indranil Bhattacharjee. A new episode of The Morning Brief drops every Tuesday, Thursday, Friday on a listening platform of your choice. Also, don't miss our brand new podcast, Corner Office Conversation, where we talk to the most interesting business leaders in India and the world. Every alternate Monday on your favorite listening platform. Stay tuned.